And here I thought Mack Brown was going to coach forever. 73 years old, and North Carolina has decided to part ways, and that's probably a wise move. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by for the best discussion, debate, and analysis right here. It's based on your participation. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. I will get to them. Super chats are available. That will obviously bring attention to your comment or question. We also would encourage you actually to comment on Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App and to contribute there. That is much more to your advantage and to our advantage here at the Voice of College Football. The only thing I would ask is that you would let me know in the chat with capital letters that you've contributed on Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App, and therefore we can recognize that and also respond to your question or comment. Again, Mack Brown, 73 years old. I don't know why I highlight that. That's an issue with me right there. We shouldn't highlight the man's age. Is he doing the job or not doing the job? It reminds me of another position in this country. Really doesn't matter how old you are. It just matters, are you doing the job? And based on North Carolina's standards, expectations, and what they foresee for the future of the program, Mack Brown is not fulfilling those expectations. I found it interesting that about a week ago, I had produced a video and I put Mack Brown on the hot seat of the top 10 hot seats in college football. Also, I cannot verify this because I do not read Dennis Dodd. And for those of you who watch me on a regular basis know that I don't really partake of college football content out there. So I only hear what you guys tell me, and then I follow up on it on many occasions. But apparently, because a number of people told me this, CBS's Dennis Dodd reported that Mack Brown would leave North Carolina under his terms, meaning he would make the decision that North Carolina said, hey, you can be the coach here as long as you would like, for as long as you would like. It's your job. You have built up the equity. You have done so much for us that we owe this to you. My response to that is that that would be complete idiocy for any university, any athletic program to operate like that. Coaches should be retained. They should maintain their position based on their competence, not based on their legacy, not based on anything that they've done in the past. They were paid for that. Bobby Bowden was paid for his great years at Florida State. And when he was no longer able to lead the program to the expectations and standards of Florida State, you've done great. Maybe we give you a little bit more time than we would just anybody else. But I don't believe that anyone is owed payment or compensation or employment because of current incompetence based on what they've accomplished in the past. That's not the way to run a business. That's not the way to run a football program. And we're talking about, most likely, I have not verified this, but he has to be the highest paid employee in the state of North Carolina. If he's not, he's in the top 3. So he is highly compensated for what he does. And based on UNC's standards, he's not meeting that standard. Now, earlier this season, North Carolina gave up 70 points to James Madison. Is James Madison a good football team? Well, they have been a great FCS program and a great Group of 5 program. But should they be scoring 70 points against North Carolina? Should anybody score 70 points against North Carolina? So they lose 70-50, and Mack Brown said, I am not retiring. I am not resigning. Okay. And then fast forward a few weeks, and apparently I've not seen it again, but I read it enough times that I believe it's verified that at Mack Brown's news conference this week, he was asked about the 2025 season, and he said that he'll be back in 2025. So because my initial thought, I was on the phone with a friend when I saw this news, and I said, oh, here we've hit the day of reckoning for some college football coaches. Most of them are going to come this Sunday. So this Sunday's Black Sunday. This is when most of the coaches get fired, coming up this Sunday after the final regular season game. But we're starting early with Mack Brown. And his comment to me was, poor guy, they fired him before the last game. Couldn't they wait until Saturday after the game? And so then I find out apparently that Mack Brown made a comment in response to a question at this week's news conference that he would be back in 2025. That being the case, I can understand why North Carolina would say, okay, we're going to step in, make this announcement, make this public. Okay, we cannot have this lingering for days and days and days, and this conflict of reports getting out that we are cutting ties with Mack Brown, and Mack Brown stating that he's going to be back for 2025. But let's read the ESPN article, and then we will take your calls. This comes from ESPN's Andrea Adelson. North Carolina announced Tuesday that Mack Brown will not return next season, one day after the Hall of Fame coach declared his intentions to return to the Tar Heels. There you go. Athletic Director Bubba Cunningham informed Brown of his decision on Tuesday. Brown, 73. Again, I'm curious of the consistency of the journalism here. I wonder if the age of these guys are always mentioned. I don't know. I would have to go back and backtrack on that because otherwise it shouldn't be mentioned. Brown, 73, will coach the team in the regular season finale against NC State Saturday on a decision, but a decision has not yet been made about whether he will coach the Tar Heels in their bowl game. While this was not the perfect time and way in which I imagined going out, no time will ever be the perfect time, Brown said in a statement. I've spent 16 seasons at North Carolina and will always cherish the memories and relationships Sally and I have built while serving as head coach. We've had the chance to coach and mentor some great young men, and we'll miss having the opportunity to do that in the future. Moving forward, my total focus is on helping these players and coaches prepare for Saturday's game against NC State and give them the best chance to win. We want to send these seniors out right, and I hope our fans will show up Saturday to do the same. In 2 stints at North Carolina, Brown has gone a combined 113, 78, and 1. Some of you may not be aware, prior to 1997, yes, there were ties in college football. Brown, who won a national championship with Texas after his first UNC tenure, returned to the Tar Heels in 2019 and took them to an ACC championship game appearance in 2022. Mack Brown has won more games than any football coach in UNC history, and we deeply appreciate all that he has done for Carolina football and our university, Cunningham said in a statement. Over the last 6 seasons, his second campaign in Chapel Hill, he has coached our team to 6 bowl berths, including an Orange Bowl, while mentoring 18 NFL draft picks. Coach Brown has led the Carolina football program back into the national conversation as we improved the program's facilities, significantly increased the size of the staff, invested in salaries, and bolstered our nutrition and strength and conditioning programs. He also has been a dedicated fundraiser, strengthening the football endowment while also supporting our other sports programs. And we thank and wish him all the best. Yeah, Mack Brown on every level appears to be, I don't know the man, so I'm not going to vouch for him personally, but seems to be an upstanding guy. And it should be noted that North Carolina was a bad football program when he arrived the first time. And he had 2 rough years. 1 in 10, I believe, were the first 2 seasons. And then he lifted North Carolina football to way beyond respectability. It was a top 10 team in the polls at least 2 of those seasons, and they had an 11-1 finish there near the end of his tenure, which obviously earned him the Texas job and set him up for the Texas job, and he did a remarkable job there. And then back at North Carolina, not so successful this time, but he's done fine. He's done okay. Basically 7-5, 7-5, 7-5, 7-5. Basically with a bowl win or loss, 8-5 has been what he's basically done if you look at his winning percentage. But I think it should be noted, North Carolina, and this is really a mark of an excellent coach who's able to do this multiple times in multiple stops. So, for example, Dabo Swinney is an all-time great. But do any of us know if he could succeed anywhere else? We don't. He's only done it at Clemson. For Mack Brown, North Carolina was awful. He raised them to top 10 status consistently. Then he left and they fell apart. Texas, awful throughout the 90s. Much of the 90s, Texas football down. Mack Brown steps in, elevates them to national championship status. and one of the top 5 to 10 teams in the country almost consistently throughout his tenure. He leaves Texas, they fall apart. He goes to North Carolina the second time. Larry Fedora won 5 games in the 2 previous seasons. He elevates North Carolina. Now, this time, they plateaued. They went to the 2022 ACC championship game, and really, even that team was not that good. They got blasted by Clemson. They lost 5 games. So North Carolina turned into a top 40 team under Mack Brown. So he elevated, but then they plateaued, and it is time. All right, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We've got a call coming in from Jackson. Jackson, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Mark. How you doing today?
You are muted.
Oh. Oh. Can you hear me now?
So I don't know what the issue is there. I've checked on my end.
Oh, my end, it says it's on.
Okay, Jackson, I got you. My bad.
All right. How you doing today?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. This news, unfortunately, does not surprise me by the least. It was when I heard about this today, I was like, yeah, this allowing 70 points against James Madison and blowing a 20-point lead against Duke, that was going to hurt him, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
And getting blown away by Boston College on the CW on last week, when Boston College QB Thomas Castellanos like, you know what? I'm leaving BC. I'm out of here. Get beat down 41-21. That could not have been good. That was not good. I've been thinking about the coaching candidates for North Carolina.
Yeah.
Jamie Chadwell, I've said plenty of times that I think he'd be a great candidate for North Carolina. John Sumrall would be a great one for Tulane. Andy Kotelnicki, the Penn State OC, would be a humongous get. I mean, maybe this is too big of a get, but Georgia DC Glenn Schumann.
Too big of a get for North Carolina?
Anything can happen. We'll wait and see.
To get Glenn Schumann to get a defensive coordinator?
I don't know, but we'll wait and see. Barry Odom.
No, I would think that any coordinator in the country would want to be the head coach at North Carolina.
I just wonder if Schumann is waiting for a bigger job, honestly. If he wants to stay at Georgia for another couple years, or if he wants a bigger job, like kind of like how Dan Lanning waited for the perfect job. Oregon came calling, bam, he goes to Oregon.
Yeah.
I wonder if the same thing's happening for Schumann.
Okay. Could be.
But yeah, Barry Odom, he's done a tremendous job over at UNLV. I mean, nobody wins at UNLV football.
True.
But he has. The impossible has happened. I see they got cousin Eddie, Dan Mullen on the list.
Dan Mullen. Yeah, if I was going to go after those 3 guys, I would vet out Sumrall and Odom first. Dan Mullen did an excellent job on the field at Florida, but he got in his own way and acted like a fool too many times and made too many bad off-the-field decisions is what happened there.
Yeah, I wonder if he's gotten too comfortable with staying at ESPN calling Thursday night football and doing halftime updates, or if he wants to go back to coaching like that. That's more of a question for him, but we'll wait and see. Like maybe North Carolina is the right opportunity for him to get back into coaching. Maybe it's not. We don't know yet.
Well, Jackson, we appreciate you being here.
All right, and I'll tell you right now, got a fun-filled lineup. The Ole Miss show's coming up. The Steve Day show. I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a fun one.
Should be.
Oh, yeah. And the rest of the lineup, the Michigan show and the Georgia show is something to tell your friends, your family, and the cashiers at Publix about. And don't forget to tell the cashiers about the magic that Mark will be having on the playoff rankings watch party. Stay
Appreciate
tuned.
it,
You won't
Jackson.
want to miss it. And don't forget to get the Disputed National Champions, the 90s reset of college football written by Mark Rogers himself.
Thanks for being here, Jackson.
You're welcome, Mark.
Have a good one. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line here?
Hi, Mark. This is Kobe.
Kobe,
I am a UNC grad and fan, so
I
I'm
see
excited
that.
to be talking to you about this. Thanks for
Very
taking my
nice.
call.
Absolutely. So what are your thoughts?
So I am one of the seemingly rare defenders of Mack Brown as a
Okay.
UNC grad and UNC fan. A couple of different reasons. One, I do think he's done a phenomenal job. I mean, before he took over, my two final years at UNC, we won 3 games and then we won 2. So and then as soon as he came in, we've been bowl eligible ever since. And I will say that it is true we've underperformed, like with Drake May. There's no question about it. You should win more than 8 games with Drake May. So I would agree that his tenure hasn't been perfect. But here's my question for UNC fans and everything is like, who are we going to get that is better than Mack Brown? He's a Hall of Fame coach. He's won a national championship. And here's the other thing is the problem with UNC with football, which is different than basketball, of course, is that with UNC football, we are a stepping stone for a coach. So if a coach does really well at UNC, they're going to go to Alabama or Georgia or Texas or whatever. And that's the problem that I see. And that was the benefit of Mack, is that no matter how good we were, he wasn't going to leave. He wasn't going to go back to Texas or something. He was going to finish his career at UNC. And I'm not saying that we can never do better than we've done with Mack, but what I'm saying is that if we have a coach who does really well that replaces Mack, I think that as soon as he has that first 10-win season or maybe 2 10-win seasons in a row, he's gonna leave, just like Mack did in 97. So I think that is a part where fans are a little bit short-sighted. And I do agree with the prior call that we were discussing, that we can get a great defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator at an SEC program, but as soon as they're successful, I just think they're going to leave. So I don't know. I don't love this news. The other thing is I don't like the way it was handled. I don't understand how there's not some sort of press release where it's spun as his decision to leave. To me, it was shocking to see I'm still in shock that it was announced in the way that it was. But that's my thoughts on it.
So, Kobe, to get to your latter point, so you would have liked North Carolina to meet with Mack Brown and say, we are firing you. We don't want it to be presented that way. Therefore, you need to step down, or present it in such a way that we've come to an agreement that it's best for us to part ways.
Exactly. Yes. I think that could have been done in a better way, where all Mack had to do is just come out and say, hey, I'm retiring. And then it's his idea, or at least it looks that way. Granted, I know it doesn't always work that way. And it always comes out that like, oh, they weren't really fired. That kind of happened with Mack at Texas, where it was like, oh, he resigned, but everybody kind of knew he didn't.
Sure.
So, yeah,
And
I don't know.
That's kind of my point. What does that really serve when everyone knows what the truth is?
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. I guess it's just, for me, it's such a bummer for it to end in this way. It's very surprising to me. And it does also speak, like, I do think Mack has kind of viewed himself as like, he's deserving of not getting fired. He's kind of has earned the right to step out when he wants to. So it's just a bummer, it's a bummer of a situation, but I guess I've just never agreed with all of the UNC fans that have wanted to move on, because the grass always looks greener on the other side, but I don't know that it's that simple. I really don't.
So I don't know at what point they made the decision to fire him. So that has much to do with this as well, whether they knew this 2 or 3 weeks ago, or whether they determined a long time ago, at whatever point, or just determined the last couple of days, or maybe we're on the brink of making the decision. And then Mack Brown states at his news conference this week, just on Monday, that he's going to be back for 2025. I think that's what prompted them to act suddenly. Not that they weren't going to fire him anyway, but it most likely would have happened after the game on Saturday, but that they wanted to just end any kind of speculation and set the record straight.
I do think I completely agree with that. I think there's also a very complicated dynamic where Mack has repeatedly said in press conferences where he's kind of like, the donors are behind me. And what he's kind of insinuating is almost like the AD isn't in charge. like he's kind of trying to say like, I am going to leave when I want to leave. I have the donors on my side. And it was a little bit of a power struggle. And I think a little bit of it was our AD trying to be like, no, I'm actually in charge. Like, like I decide when you come back or when you leave. So I agree with that. I think that was a part of it as well.
So Kobe, you obviously have a great investment in North Carolina, are a graduate and are a big fan and well thought through and thoughtful. But the place where I would disagree with you is that he or anybody else has earned longevity. I don't agree with that. You're not running your father's hardware store down the street. You have a commitment and an obligation and accountability to the people of the state. He's the highest paid. I'm making this assumption, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong by 1 or 2 positions. The highest paid employee in the state. Therefore, there's an obligation that if he's not doing the job to the standard, he was paid for 1997. He was paid for obviously 2019, 20, 21 Orange Bowl appearance. So you're being paid based on your current performance. And at the point that you can no longer perform to the expectations, then I don't think anybody earns the right just to stick around forever. He's 73 years old. If he wanted to coach till he was 85, he can stick around for 12 years and go 3-9 every year just because he wants to.
It's a good point. And the trajectory wasn't great. I mean, you look at the recruiting rankings. I mean, there was a period where our recruiting class was number 8 in the country. I mean, we were number 1 in ACC by a lot. And you look at the trajectory of, well, I would have said Florida State, but that's really bad. But you look at the trajectory of Miami since Cristobal's been there, and then contrast that with Mack. It's not the same trajectory. So in our recruiting ratings now, I think we're 67 in our upcoming class. I mean, that's not good. So, and I know it's like transfer portal and this and that, but I do think another piece of it is the UNC job is objectively less desirable, I think, than it was before he started. I think when he started, it was a very desirable job. It still is. I think it's a great place to be a coach, whether it's basketball or really any sport. But our NIL is not competitive. Our fan culture for football is not super competitive. So I think it's going to be tricky to course correct. I really do. I'm hopeful, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So I do think that it's worth a risk to go out and try to get an up and comer. I think that North Carolina can be an excellent job. I think it's a really good job as it stands right now. I think it's a top 25 job in the country, and that you can go out and hopefully get someone that will work themselves into the job. They're an up and comer, and they won't consider, at least not initially, or not consider just the purpose of this job is to elevate to Clemson or Miami or wherever. Beyond that they see this somewhere you can build and win. And even if they don't, then why not? They obviously have to succeed to get that jump. So they're going to be successful at North Carolina to be able to get that promotion to wherever. So I see it as the move to make.
So if you were the AD, you would have fired Mack too, you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he I think he did a remarkable job. I don't know if you heard my comments before you jumped on or before we got into the stories, but basically I think it's, first of all, he seems like a great guy. He just seems like a first-rate guy, first-rate person, ran football programs as best you can and as in a upright way as you possibly can in modern day college football. And the mark of a great coach to me, one of them is that you took over multiple jobs. So Dabo Swinney's done a great job at Clemson, but we don't know that he could go anywhere and replicate what he's done there. But Mack Brown goes to North Carolina the first go around, turns an awful program into an excellent top 10 program, leaves, they get worse. He takes over Texas that had been down throughout the 90s, elevates them to national championship status and top 5 status year after year after year, leaves, they nosedive. And even though he had a bit of a faltering at the end of his career, still or his run at Texas, they were much worse off without him. And then he does the same thing in North Carolina, as you mentioned. Larry Fedora's 5-19 the 2 years before Mack Brown shows up, and Mack Brown immediately, boom, they're a bowl team. And then they're going to an ACC championship game, and they're going to an Orange Bowl. But then it obviously has tapered off, and he's not been able to push beyond that. And they don't play the most. Now, I got to credit North Carolina. They do go out and schedule difficult non-conference games, but within the conference, they're not playing the most difficult schedules in the world. And if they're just going to repeat 8-5, 8-5, 8-5, then I think it's time to move on.
And with Drake May, I mean, Drake May is ridiculously good. And Sam Howell was also super good. And
sure.
I think, other teams would have killed to have a quarterback like that. And to win 8 games, and we've lost 3 years in a row to NC State as well, which is just ridiculous. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm really eager to see the one thing I am curious, and I don't mean to take up too much time, so if I need to go, let me know. I am curious to know your thoughts on the timing of announcing it before the NC State game. To me, that is really interesting, but there might be something I'm missing as to why that they did that. I guess it might tie into what you were saying earlier, that he was planting seeds at ESPN that, hey, I'm staying. And maybe that's why they felt they needed to do that.
I hope that's the reason they did it. I don't see any other reason. I don't think the recruiting portion of this is that crucial for 3 or 4 days to hang on to your coach and then make the announcement late Saturday. But so I'm guessing that it was just the conflict of contradictory statements going out, that there was thought that he was going to be let go, but then there were reports, well, it was coming out of his own mouth that he would be back for 2025.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and the other, the thing is that our defense has just been laughable, even in the years where we went to an Orange Bowl. I mean, we haven't been good on defense the whole time that he's been back. And we hired Gene Chizik. That was a disaster. It's so bad. And so there was a little bit, and that goes to your point of hiring a younger coach, of Gene Chizik was really good about 20 years ago. So he would have been a great hire then. So we need to get who are the new defensive guys, who are these 40, 50-year-old guys. It's not necessarily an age thing. It's just an experience,
Sure.
Who are growing up in this new ecosystem of football and the way that the sport has changed and evolved, who is up on that trends. But we did not really have a defensive coordinator that matched that.
And not just a good defensive coordinator, but you probably know as well as I do that their recruiting, as you mentioned, was really good during his first few years. And therefore, they had a horrendous defense, especially it might have been 2022. But if you looked at the recruiting rankings, their defense was stacked. They had an excellent defense from a talent perspective, but they made nothing out of it.
That's coaching. What else do you attribute that to?
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
It's coaching from a player standpoint and not developing the players and their techniques, but it's also a coaching situation from the standpoint of scheme, not scheming, preparing for games, being outsmarted by the other team, not making adjustments in game. So it's coaching on both levels.
Yes. And my hope is that speaking of going with somebody younger, I hope that they get somebody who is sort of like almost like an offensive mastermind, one of these sort of guys who is more of an X's and O's guy. Mack is really known as a CEO head coach. He gives a lot of control to the OC and the DC to do what they want to do. And if things go wrong in the scheme, then it's a little bit more like, hey, ask the offensive coordinator what happened there, and he's not as involved with that. Of course, I'm not in the meetings. I don't know, but this is just the interpretation or thought around Mack as a coach, is that he's more of the CEO head coach. So maybe they would benefit from getting somebody like an OC, really, or a defensive coordinator, but probably an offensive coordinator who is really running an innovative system and will help us in that regard, and who's very X's and O's oriented, so that we don't get kind of outcoached in some of those situations.
Keep Chopping here is suggesting Danton Lynn, the defensive coordinator at USC. So he took over at UCLA, immediately excellent defense. He then went to USC this season, immediately an upgrade in defense. He's an up-and-comer. That would fly in the face of your offensive move. But I think the one important aspect, and this can be proven and seen in almost all coaching hires that turn out to be successful, that if you hire an offensive-minded head coach, then you need an extremely strong defensive coordinator or vice versa.
Yeah, and Mack he's paid $5 million a year. So I would imagine that if they bring in somebody younger, you're probably looking at around the 3.5, 4, maybe up to $5 million. They have to pay him out for his contract now. So this might be part of the reason that he didn't want to leave, is now he's going to be paid 3 years, $5 million. So we're going to pay him out $15 million. By the way, this is we just finished paying Larry Fedora, I think, a year ago. So the donors are getting taken to the cleaner here. But yeah, it's, I think probably somewhere in that range, somewhere in that budget of $4-5 million, which is a very nice pay raise for an OC or a DC, but probably a head coach, maybe less so. But I think you're right. It is a very desirable job. I mean, Chapel Hill is a great place to live. It's a great place to live. The school is beautiful. Campus is beautiful. The people are great. And it's a really nice place to be. So I do think it is and the academic and athletic institution goes about things the right way. So yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. But I would be surprised if we get a head coach to come do it. I do think it's going to be an up and coming OC or DC. That would be my prediction.
Yeah, I would tend to lean in your direction, and there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to make sure that you really vet out the process, that particular coordinator is ready to run a football program at that level. I was just trying to do some research on Mack Brown's buyout. Do you happen to know what that figure is? I haven't been able to find it.
I do not know. I know that his contract, it has 3 more years. I guess if you count this year, I think it's like 2.5 or whatever, because it goes till 2027.
Yeah, exactly. January 2028. So through 27.
Yep.
And
I do know he makes $5 million a year.
So there you go. It's probably in the range of 15 to 18 million the remainder of this year, and then 3 full seasons. So 16, 17 million, something in that range. So that's kind of chump change compared to what we've heard about buyouts here recently with the likes of Jimbo Fisher and Gus Malzahn and all sorts of other people, not Mario Cristobal, but others.
But proportional to Texas A&M's football budget.
Yes.
To our football
absolutely.
budget, it's an pretty
absolutely.
equal.
And also, I'm not the first person to say this, so I'm not going to take credit for this, but it makes total sense that the conjecture is that going forward, that these contracts are going to settle down, number one, because of money needing to be put into the NIL initiatives. And then the buyouts of these contracts, that's going to be negotiated differently because these programs can't be on the hook for $25-30 million to these coaches that they fired because they kept going 5 and 7. And when they need to resource that money for NIL.
Yeah. I mean, that $2 million difference in compensation, that $2 million will get you a lot on the offensive line. You could use that $2 million for your O line. And what is the difference going to make in terms of, is it $2 million on your O line, or is it $2 million for maybe a slightly better coach? I don't know,
Yep.
Especially because it's so hard to get O line. The one thing I will say that I do think makes sense about the Mack move is, it's been a little bit frustrating as a fan because I watch every press conference that he does. And a critique I do have is he does complain a good amount about the institution of college football. When you watch his press conferences, he has a lot of complaints about the way things are and the NIL And, he says all the right things. Like, I'm glad the pairs are being played. The players are getting paid. But it's very evident that he doesn't like the direction of the sport. Like a lot of coaches don't. But there's a little bit of it where it's like there are people like Dion who are kind of like embracing the direction of the sport. Like, this is the way things are. I'm going to lean into it. And we're just going to get results despite that. Versus Mack, who's a little bit more coming at it from the position of like, well, it shouldn't be this way. Like, we need to fix it. And that makes me think he might be a really good candidate for like a CFP commissioner sort of role. Not sure that would even happen or if that would work, but I do think he'd be a very good fit for a role like that. I think that he would be someone who would help shepherd the sport in a good direction. But as a head coach, the last thing you want to do is listen to a press conference and be like, yeah, like this whole system is like bogus. People are trying to buy my players and this is a problem. We don't have enough money. And it's kind of like, as a fan, I just want to win. I don't care about any of these problems, So I don't know.
And the odds of him or anybody else swimming upstream and fixing the sport are minuscule compared to, yes, let's spend the time, the energy, the focus into pressing into the way it's flowing and getting the advantages we need. Now, there's nothing wrong with my approach would be, hey, I'm going to shut my mouth and not say anything about the issues I have with college football. Now, if I'm asked a question, I'm going to be honest about, yes, I wish and liked when things were run differently and the structure of the sport was different. However, we're in a new age and this is the way things are done. Now, I do think that, so paying the players, that ship has sailed, it's flying, it's gone. And that's great, actually. We live in America. People should be compensated for what they do. That's great. Do I think some of the money's ridiculous? Of course I do. But again, you can't have a perfect balance, and it's not a perfect world. They're workers for a multi-billion-dollar industry, and so they should be paid and compensated. That said, I have no issue with Mack Brown or anybody else saying this should be structured. It's just been the wild, wild west, and it's starting to become structured, and there are forces at work that are structuring it now, which is a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so maybe that could be a good next step for him. I think that's what he would love to do. Well, I think what he would love to do is to keep coaching. As we saw, he didn't really want to leave. I think for Mack, also a big thing that drives him, and I don't at all mean this in a negative way, but I think like legacy is something that really drives him. I think what he really wanted to do is he wanted to come in to UNC and I think if the Drake May year of his last year, I think if they went 11-1, he would have retired and said, okay, we went from 2 wins to 11. My trajectory is this. I'm leaving. And that's what he wanted to do, I think. And basically say all three, like you pointed out, all 3 of my tenures were like a huge win where it was like this and I'm out. And I think the reason he stayed this year, because I think he's been fed up with the NIL and transfer portal. He complains about it all the time. So he's been fed up with it. But I think the reason he stayed is because he just wanted to end on a good note. He wanted to end on a note where he had a really good 10, 11 win season, something like this. And he also looked at the schedule for this year and said, we don't play anybody good. The one team in our preseason where we're like, this is a definite loss was Florida State. So that was our one game that we etched in as like, okay, we're not going to win that. And Florida State is Florida State this year.
No.
So
at least he got to beat them for the first time ever. At least he didn't get fired before he got to beat Florida State once.
That's true.
Of,
14
times?
Yeah, he's an alum of Florida State. So I think that he looked at this schedule and said, okay, even though we're going to have a down year, I think we're still going to win 10 games. And it just didn't work out. So.
All right. Anything else, Kobe?
No, that's it. Thank you, Mark. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's nice to get some perspective from an alum.
Yes, absolutely, Mark. Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Enjoy the game this weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
That's one of those under the radar national rivalries. Well, it's not a national rivalry, but from a national perspective, for most college football fans, not big on NC State and North Carolina, but I love that rivalry. I think it's on the ACC network. A couple marginal teams going at it. NC State needs to win to get to bowl eligibility, which used to be a big deal. Now it's a big deal because the teams need to practice. That's the aim, to get to a bowl game now. If you're a bad team, just get to a bowl game so we can line up for 15 practices and see what we've got and work in some younger players. It's not about, oh, we made a bowl game. That's a big deal. And for North Carolina, they've already reached bowl status at 6 and 5. But again, two marginal teams and the rivalry there. So we've seen John Sumrall, Dan Mullen, Barry Odom. Again, I would not, sitting here right this second, be able to differentiate my preference between Sumrall and Odom, other than Odom has run a big-time program before, Missouri. But I'd have to vet those two guys out. I'd really have to look at what they bring to the table, interview them. They would both take precedence for me over Dan Mullen, even though Dan Mullen's been much more successful. Because Dan Mullen, you just don't know what the guy's going to do. And if he would have run amok once or twice, maybe, then that would have been fine. But it was just repeatedly. Dan Mullen had a great situation at Florida. No, he was not necessarily challenging Kirby Smart on the recruiting front. He did win the game in 2020, his second to last season, and won the SEC Eastern Division to get to the championship game and had a high-flying, prolific offense. But Dan Mullen did a heck of a job at Florida when you consider that he took it over and they were in shambles. They had won 4 games. And all he did was elevate, 3 consecutive New Year's 6 games and won 2 of them. And then he had one bad season, which he certainly would have been able to withstand. They weren't going to fire Dan Mullen based on one bad season. But, oh my goodness, you had a fight at midfield before halftime against Missouri in which he instigated the fight to a certain extent. I'm not going to say that he was the impetus for the fight, but he did not act like a head coach, and he was out in the middle messing around, and if you ever watch the video of that. So that was not a good thing. And then he made a lot of excuses afterwards. And then he shows up like Darth Vader on Halloween, which is not the end of the world. That's fine. It just kind of plays into the clownish act that he became. But showing up at a news conference as Darth Vader doesn't hurt anyone. It's fine. I don't want my head coach doing it, but I'm not going to fire him because of it. That's fine. But again, with all the other things going on at the time, when your team's headed toward a 6 and 7 season and you're showing up wearing your Darth Vader costume, and then the defense imploded. You had the Quincy Wilson shoe throwing incident at LSU. And again, Dan Mullen can't be responsible. Well, he's responsible for, he can't control all the actions of his players. However, he acted like he didn't even know that it happened after the game. He said, I don't know what really happened, when he was asked about it. Well, of course he knew what happened. The official, even if he didn't see it from where he was standing, the official threw a flag, and they went over and talked to the head coaches in terms of what happened. So he knew what happened, and he just, I didn't really see it. I don't know what happened. What else happened that year? There were like 5 things that Dan Mullen did that were just complete missteps. And of course, if he would have gone 10 and 2, then he would have been just fine. But he went 6 and 6. So I think he got fired with 2 games left. They might have been 5 and 5 when he got fired. But Dan Mullen's a heck of a football coach, heck of an offensive coach. So if he gets the defense in line, hires a good defensive coordinator, which I'm trying to think who the D coordinator was at Florida when Dan Mullen was there. Can't believe I can't come up with that. But yeah, I'm there. If Dan Mullen's the only guy on planet Earth to coach my football team, I'm okay with that. I'll deal with him. I'll try to keep him in line. But there are other options. Therefore, I would go after the other options. Thank you, Jackson. I knew I could count on, yes, the Blitz happy Todd Grantham, who also was the DC at Louisville. So I'm getting to the point where, and I should not make this confession, but I have forgotten more football than I know currently. Folks, when you shop Amazon, and I know you're going to shop a lot of Amazon here during the holiday season, please use the Amazon link in the description section of this video and all the videos right here at the Voice of College Football. We would appreciate if you would do that. And as Jackson also communicated to everyone, disputed national champions. While you're on Amazon, please look it up, or you can just use the link that's down in the description section of this video and all the videos. I believe you will love this. I truly do. You love college football, you'll love this. It's a historical reset of the 1990s. We go through the entire 1990s every season, but it's not a history book. We bring it forward into the BCS era, the 4-team college football playoff era, the 12-team playoff era, and now the 14-team proposed playoff format. And so it's a whole lot of fun, and you can pick that up on Amazon. Disputed national champions. Appreciate it. And let me know what you think of it. All right, folks, can we do any more damage on Mack Brown? Who else do we think could get fired? Well, I posted a hot seat video. Just about a week ago. And we're really at a place in college football, because the way things have shaken out over the last couple of years is that a lot of teams and programs that are underachieving aren't quite yet ready to push the guy out the door, because it's only maybe a second season. We had a big turnover 2 years ago. Nebraska, Wisconsin, Purdue, and a number of other places across the country, Virginia Tech. And so we've got a lot of Brent Pryce and Luke Fickles and Matt Rules and Ryan Walters and others who have been in their job for 2 years. They're not doing well, but they've only been there for 2 years. Go through the Big Ten. Based on the recruiting exploits currently, Bryce Underwood and others, I don't think Sharon Moore is going to get fired. I thought there was a possibility of that happening a few weeks ago, but Michigan has kind of steadied the ship, and the recruiting is at a place where I think Sharon Moore is fine for 2025. Mike Loxley, I put him on the list, but he's only had one bad year. But sometimes if a program deems, okay, we've had a bad season, plus the recruiting, plus the trajectory of the conference, it's getting away from us, let's go do something about it. I think that Mike Loxley could be in trouble. Ryan Walters, despite me just mentioning him as getting the job in 2023, it's only a second season, 1-11. They're awful. They beat an FCS team that Purdue. They were in the Big Ten championship game under Jeff Brown. And to compare and contrast Jeff Brom, Ryan Walters, they may not wait. They may say, okay, this is not working. Ryan Walters, gone. That's about all I see out of the Big Ten, because, again, new coaches at Washington, UCLA, Dan Lanning's tearing it up, et cetera, across the board. In the SEC, out of the coaches that aren't doing well right now, Sam Pittman would be at the top of the list. Now, he's going to get back to a bowl game here at 6-6, even if they lose to Mizzou. So he would be at the top of the SEC list. Jeff Levy's new at Mississippi State. Mike Elko. Everybody else is doing fine or doing extremely well. Brian Kelly, of course, there's just too much of a buyout there. And it's not a disaster at LSU, but his record right now is fireable a year later. If they finish 8-4 this year, maybe they lose to Oklahoma and go 7-5. Who knows what happens in the bowl game? And then Brian Kelly comes back next year and it's another 8-5. Then LSU is going to be looking under every mattress cover and seat cushion to find money to get rid of Brian Kelly. I would not be surprised if they do it this offseason, but I think he's got one more year. And Manny Diaz is new at Duke. Georgia Tech's fine with Brent Key. Of course, Syracuse new with Fran Brown. Bill O'Brien, a lot of new coaches. Lots of new coaches all over the place. So I made a list of 10. But, I think somebody like Mike Gundy, you talk about having equity somewhere. Yeah, this season has been a complete train wreck, but Mike Gundy should be safe. And everybody else in the Big 12 is either performing or they just got hired. Willie Fritz at Houston, Scott Satterfield. Cincinnati's a little bit better than a lot of people anticipated. The one exception would be Neil Brown. He might get fired. He was at the top of my list. Neil Brown, Gus Malzahn, Mike Loxley. Yeah, so I don't know that we're going to have, and I had Mack Brown on my list. So check that one off. I got 1 out of 10, and we'll see about the other 9. But I don't know that we're going to have the rash of coaches' firings that we typically have. And with this expanded playoff field, there is going to come a day, I don't think it's going to be this year, but in the next 5 years, I predict that there will be a playoff coach who will get fired because the bar, the expectation is so high at certain places that if you go 10-2, 9-3, 9-3, we're seeing 9-3 a possibility for the playoffs this year. Check out the video I posted where I go through the SEC college football playoff scenarios because there is a real possibility that there will be a 9-3 team make the playoffs because if you compare all of these probable 10-2 teams in the Big 12 versus the 9-3 teams in the SEC is going to get the nod every time. It's just going to be a determination by the committee as to, do we go Alabama? Do we go South Carolina? Alabama limping at the end with a loss against Oklahoma. That was not just a loss against a marginal team, but an ugly loss. Or South Carolina's red hot. They beat Clemson. They're rolling it down the stretch. They finished 9-3. So I would not be surprised if an SEC team at 9-3 is chosen over a 10-2 Big 12 team. It was a bad weekend. It was a bad weekend for the SEC in that they could have wrapped up a ton of playoff spots. So they put themselves in jeopardy. However, as soon as Bama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M lost, well, the Big 12's losing games. BYU, Colorado. And so that only supported the SEC. It was a much worse week for the Big 12 because their best outcome is whoever is the highest ranked team tonight in the Big 12 to just go on and win the championship. Win this weekend, win the Big 12 championship. That is the best outcome for the Big 12. Whoever is going to be the highest ranked team, which I believe it's going to be Arizona State. I've got Arizona State 16, Iowa State 17, BYU 18, Colorado 21-22. So Arizona State's the hottest team. Go on and win the Big 12 championship. That is the best outcome. But to compare those teams against 9-3 SEC teams, people are just in an uprage about they're in a rage or an uproar, got those mixed up, over SEC teams possibly qualifying at 9-3. And I get that, but it's not like they're going to be bypassing 11-1 teams for a 9-3 SEC team. That 9-3 SEC team is going to be elevated over after a comparison to a 10-2 Big 12 team. These 9-3 SEC teams have played better against better competition and have better resumes than 10-2 Big 12 teams. Clemson, they will be 10-2 with a win against South Carolina. they could throw a bit of a situation at the committee as well. If they go 10-2, they beat South Carolina, which kind of would amend or make up for the Georgia loss. So Clemson would probably be the team that would have the best shot of making it as a 10-2 team outside of the SEC in those two conferences. Clemson would have the best resume. They were 17 last week. I don't know where they will end up tonight, probably 15 or 16. And then they've got South Carolina. And then, of course, they could have an opportunity at the ACC championship game if Syracuse upsets Miami. All right, folks, don't see any comments or questions. Oh, we got one. We got Jackson here. Jackson says Montana State head coach Brett Vagan should be a candidate. I know nothing about that gentleman, but I will now look into him. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. This is what we do and what we've done for years when there is a major coaching, firing, or hiring. We're here live immediately with you. I think about all the coaches throughout the years. Boom, we jumped on immediately. Mark D'Antonio, Mark Richt, Willie Taggart, Mike Norvell, Lincoln Riley, Brian Kelly, etc., etc., etc. We were here immediately taking your calls. So Mack Brown, we wish him well with whatever he chooses to do and has a long life and much success in retirement if that's what he chooses to do, or I'm sure he has all sorts of business ventures and otherwise. And we will, of course, be following the North Carolina coaching search. All right, folks, do appreciate you being here. I am off to the Ole Miss channel. So if you want to see the Ole Miss show today, you got to check it out on the Ole Miss channel. So we will put that in the chat. So please join us at 2 p.m. Eastern time in 20 minutes. We've got a heck of a show with Leanne Herring and Ruby Dreher and myself getting together to talk some Ole Miss football every Wednesday. I know it's not Wednesday, Tuesday this week because of the holiday. And here's the link, if I did that correctly. So Jackson's got that for me, I believe. Ole Miss at the Voice of College Football. So we're live in 15 minutes over on the Ole Miss channel. Please join us there. Also, Steve Dace and myself. So, man, we've got a packed lineup here with the Ole Miss show at 2 Eastern. Then I've got the Michigan podcast record with Steve Dace at 3:15. But you don't see it live at 3:15, but that's over on the Michigan podcast. And then we've got Steve Dace at 5:30 Eastern right here. And then we've got the watch party tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. So be here for all of that. I do think this is going to be a fascinating college football rankings reveal. This is going to be the most telling of where and what the committee believes about these teams, how they truly value Indiana, how they truly value these SEC teams that lost, especially Alabama with an egregious loss, a horrible loss. All right. Again, Steve Dace live at 5:30 Eastern right here. The watch party right here at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And you'll see me in 15 minutes over on the Ole Miss channel with Rebels Live. See you then.